Welcome to the Contreras Report, the Political Report. First, thank you for being there, and thanks to those who have subscribed to the Political Report or the international edition of the Contreras Report. We have much to report this week of December 14th. If you've subscribed, to do so. If you haven't, do so please at YouTube or Facebook, however you do, so that you can catch every report as it's posted, because you'll be notified. Okay, the Electoral College met on Monday the 14th and formally elected Joe Biden Jr. President of the United States, effective on his being sworn in at noon, January 20th. This formal election was held despite President Trump's refusing to acknowledge Biden's victory. The U.S. Supreme Court, however, the Trump court, considering that he's appointed 3 members of it, that's 1/3, the U.S. Supreme Court covered itself with glory on Friday, the 11th of December, by unanimously rejecting the amateur Trump appeal for the court to hear a phony lawsuit from Texas. When I say covered itself in glory, it reminded me of the Nixon Supreme Court back in 1974, when it decided 9-0 that the president had to respond to a subpoena from the Congress of the United States that was looking into impeaching the President of the United States. Nixon refused to turn over material that was demanded by a subpoena. It happened to be tapes of conversations in the White House. He refused. He claimed executive privilege. The Supreme Court said no, 9-0. And that's what happened in this case. The Trump Supreme Court, where he has appointed 3 members within the past 2 years, 3 of 9, plus 3 more were appointed by President Bush, and they were considered conservatives. So a 6-3 conservative court voted 9-0, 9-0, to turn down this appeal from Texas, to let it introduce a lawsuit which was phony. The Supreme Court said so in its statement. How dare the state of Texas ask to have laws in other states thrown out because they don't like it? The Constitution says specifically, that the states shall set up the manner, conduct elections in the manner it chooses, the legislature of that state chooses. And that's what happened here. Texas was trying to get 10 million votes thrown out because they weren't cast under rules that Texas approved of. Supreme Court said no, baloney. And of course that was the end. There are no court cases left that can have an effect on the election. There is one problem, and that is January 6th, when the Congress receives, in formal session, in joint session, receives the electoral votes, the count of how it went, which was 306 electoral votes for President to be Biden and 232 for the existing former president, soon to be former president, Donald Trump. 306 to 232. According to Donald Trump, that is a landslide because that's what he won by in 2016. So Joe Biden wins the presidency in a huge landslide, the greatest landslide ever by a challenger to an incumbent president, I think. I'm not sure. So anyway, over 50 local and state judges have rejected the Trump arguments in various states, complaining about various things. And in each case, 50 judges, state, local, and federal judges, have thrown out the cases, have dismissed them with prejudice in most cases, so they can't bring them back again. But it's too late. Because on January 6th, the Congress will get the electoral vote in a joint session chaired by the Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence, and the election results by state will be read into the record. And at that point, a congressman in the House of Representatives and a U.S. senator, has to be one of each minimum, can object to each state's electoral college vote. They can do that. But if there's one Missouri congressman or Alabama congressman who says he's going to object, if he can't get a U.S. senator to object with him, then the issue is dead. If he can get a U.S. senator, just one, to agree to object, then the question of the votes being challenged will go to the House of Representatives and to the U.S. Senate separately. Then there will be a vote in the House and in the Senate, and if it doesn't get a majority in the House and the Senate, which would be 51 votes, in the House would be 235, I think it is, then the challenge is moot and done for and dismissed. And then the votes will be accepted, and President Biden will take office on January 20th at noon. At noon. That is specified in the Constitution of the United States. In the meanwhile, the President of the United States continues to insist by tweet. He's not doing this formally with news conferences. He's given a couple of little interviews, that one before the Army-Navy game for a few minutes on Fox, and he's given another couple. He keeps insisting that he won the election. He did not win the election, folks. He didn't win the election. There was no massive fraud. We know that because the head of the election for the federal government, who protected and worked with the states to protect the election process, says there was none. And William Barr, the Attorney General of the United States, he too says that the FBI has not found anything significant in the way of vote fraud or vote stealing. That's the way it is. Oh, sure, there's a case here and a case there, and in case it's mostly Republicans voting twice for Donald Trump that have been caught. We'll hear more and more about that, but we're talking about millions of votes that were cast. To be significant, in Michigan, for example, there had to have been a switch of, there would have to be a switch of 100 and some odd thousand votes, because Biden carried the state by far more than Trump did in 2016. That's the problem, is Trump accidentally carried Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania last time, which gave him the presidency. And this time he didn't carry him. And in each case, except maybe for Wisconsin, Biden got more votes, won by more votes than Trump did in 2016. Nobody claimed fraud then, when Trump surprised everybody, including himself, in winning those states and winning the presidency by a pretty thin margin. Those 3 states take him away, he loses. So that's the situation. So that's what we have to look forward to, January 6th and January 20th. January 6th, according to the Senate leader, Republican McConnell, he has been calling individual senators and telling them it would not be a good idea to challenge the vote on January 6th. Because what will happen is, if they do, if there's one in the House and one in the Senate, if there is that challenge and it goes to the respective houses, that means that Republicans that have a majority right now, and probably will after the January 5th special election, because if the Republicans win just one of those seats, that would be Senator Perdue, who's the only one that I think has a problem. But if he wins, he doesn't have to be sworn in, because he's already a senator, right? Okay, so, well, he would have to be sworn in, but it would be there. It wouldn't be put off a day or two for the appointed senator to be sworn in, because she was appointed to fill the term until the next election. Okay, so what we have here is, if the challenge, there's one each, representative and senator that successfully challenged, and it goes to the individual houses, we know that the Democrats would never vote for turning down the electoral votes as recorded in the House. But in the Senate, there's 52 Republicans, or probably 51 at that point. And if that's the case, then there's a problem, because McConnell knows, Leader McConnell knows that the Republicans would have to vote individually. It would be a matter of record. They couldn't do it. Well, they might be able to do it by voice vote if it's approved, but I doubt it. So they would have to vote and go on record. And if they do that and lose, which they undoubtedly will, because the several Republicans would never vote to uphold the electoral vote challenge, then that would be a matter of record, and they would get really banged by President Biden hard. And those that are up for re-election in 2022 would have a real problem, because the majority of the people voted for Biden. The vast majority of the people, by millions, 5 million more votes than Trump got. And that would augur badly for Republican senators who vote to challenge electoral votes that were legitimately cast by legitimate voters and so certified by each state, including Georgia, where the Republican governor and the Republican Secretary of State have certified and claimed the vote was good. There was no fraud. They ought to know. They ran the election. And Governor Kemp is a former Secretary of State. He knows the system. Okay. All right. So what do we have to look forward to? Some problems possibly on January 6th, and then the inauguration on January 20th. Now, I have been to 3 inaugurations: 1997, Bill Clinton, and 2001, George W. Bush, and 2005, George W. Bush. I must admit that I have had a lot of fun going to inaugurations. This inauguration is not going to be the same because of the COVID-19 thing that we're all getting sick and tired of. But there is light at the end of the tunnel, which I'll talk about in a minute. What we have is there's going to be a virtual inauguration. And all of the balls, all the good stuff that I enjoyed in previous inaugurations won't happen this time, and that's sort of a shame. But yeah, the Clinton inauguration, I did go to that, but it was by sheer accident. Trust me, I was not a Clinton fan. I do not like Bill Clinton. I never have, and mainly because he, lied about the draft so he could get out of it. At the end of the Vietnam War, when they were still drafting, he lied to the University of Arkansas ROTC commander, the Army colonel, and told him that he was going to take ROTC. So they gave the permission for him to walk away, because that's what he did. And then by the time they got around to him, the draft had been ended by President Nixon. So Clinton lied. And as far as I'm concerned, he, like Trump, are traitors because they refused to serve in the armed forces of the United States during time of war. I served, and that's good enough for me. If you didn't serve, you got a problem with me. I know that's very narrow-minded, but that's one of the rights I earned as a veteran of the United States Marine Corps, to be proud of my service and to dislike those that didn't serve, that chose not to serve. If they couldn't because of a broken bone or whatever, that's one thing. But if they refuse to serve, they're on my it list. I grant you that. And I grant that that's unfair to a lot of people, but I don't care. And I earned my stripes in the Marines. I earned my graduation from boot camp with honors as an honor man. And I'll never forget it till the day I die, because once a Marine, always a Marine. Okay, so that's the political situation. The appointments that President-elect Biden are making so far are interesting, although his appointment of the nomination of California Attorney General Javier Becerra is a little interesting, because he appointed him director or cabinet secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services and HHS, and I don't think that was a good appointment. Not that Becerra, I supported Becerra when he ran for mayor one time, but he would have been better as Attorney General. Much better, I think, than whoever Biden does appoint. Because unless Biden appoints a black person or another Hispanic, he's going to not follow the pioneer George W. Bush, who appointed a Hispanic as his Attorney General, and that was the first time in the history of the United States that a Hispanic was actually realistically in line to be President of the United States. George Bush's Attorney General was the highest ranking Hispanic ever in the U.S. government, ever. So, Biden has a long way to go before he can match that, I think. But he might approve a black, but Eric Holder was the Attorney General under President Obama, and he left a sour taste in my mouth because he's the man that approved a highly controversial pardon for a traitor and a criminal named Mark Rich, who has since died. But he was on the run. The FBI actually had warrants on him when Clinton pardoned him for no particular reason other than his wife, Mark Rich's wife, a very attractive woman, either was bedding down with Clinton or was contributing millions or hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe millions, to the Clinton Foundation and to Clinton re-election campaign and to Hillary Clinton. But the pardon itself stunk. It stunk in fact, it was even worse than the Trump pardon so far. The pardon of Mike Flynn was terrible. Mike Flynn was guilty. He swore to being guilty twice in federal court. He was guilty. Roger Stone was convicted by a jury. The pardon only kept him from going to jail. Former Sheriff Joe Arpaio from Arizona was another rotten pardon. He was convicted by a jury in a federal court. He was a convicted criminal. And Trump came along and saved him from going to prison. The man actually had the gall to run for election again this last November in Phoenix, in Maricopa County. The voters of Maricopa County not only voted for Trump, but they voted against Joe Arpaio, and he never even came close. And that's one good thing that happened to the Trump pardons. Trump, between now and January 20th at 11:59 in the morning of January 20th, will pardon a whole bunch of other people. It wouldn't surprise anyone if he doesn't pardon himself and his family. And his family. They are all guilty of one crime or another. I'm not just saying that. Their very actions are proof. Their very actions are proof. For example, Jared Kushner, the son-in-law, Ivanka's husband, is a slumlord in Baltimore. He and his company own hundreds upon hundreds of apartments that are classified as slums. And they charge exorbitant rents, and they are busy evicting people all the time, even though there's an eviction period, an eviction-free period mandated by various agencies, and his firm is still preparing to evict hundreds of people onto the street in the middle of the pandemic when they're unemployed and have to stand in food lines to get food. Jared Kushner, criminal. Ivanka Kushner, his wife. I think the fact that she got trademarks, copyrights in China when Trump became president is fishy. Fishy. That's an attempted bribe, I think, by the Chinese, and she went with it. But there's other things that she has done. For example, she was paid, according to the New York Times, it had tax returns, she was paid $700,000 as a consultant to the Trump organization. The problem with that was that she was also a paid salaried employee of the corporation. How many corporations pay salaried people consulting fees on top of the salary? What we have there is a conspiracy to evade income tax laws by the Trump organization, by Donald Trump himself, because he had to have approved this. To pay her consulting fees and the salary on top of the salary, so that a claim, an exemption can be made on the income tax returns as an expense of the corporation, is illegal. That is illegal. He already paying her a salary. So there's another one. She would be guilty of conspiracy to evade taxes. Number one. Conspiracy to file false tax returns. There's at least 2 charges, okay? And Junior, here's what happened. He wrote a book, supposedly wrote a book, and he published it himself. Well, you can do this. I did it when I first started. There was a way at that time to get a book published because nobody was paying attention. And I couldn't get any interest by publishers or even agents. So I published it myself. I think I did 3. By the 4th one, I then had a publisher, and that publisher has published my books ever since, either them or Amazon. Okay, so he self-published the book, and then the Republican National Committee, the RNC, paid him $300,000 to get however many copies of that book so they could give away to donors. They would then call people or send them emails or texts asking for money contribution for their whatever particular fund it was, fundraising, and then they would get a signed copy of Junior's book, of Donald Trump Jr.'s book. $300,000. Now I can tell you based on my experience that that is probably $250,000 or $200,000 profit to Junior. So that was a way of getting a ton of money into his hands from Republican funds, Republican Party funds that were donated by mostly moderate income people and donations of $25, $50 to $100. There's something wrong with that. I'm sure there's something illegal about it, and we'll see when he files his tax returns for 2020. But I'm sure there's something wrong there. It needs investigation, because the people who donated money to the RNC did so in good faith, and they were ripped off by Don Jr., who was putting money in his pocket. So there are some examples of possible sanctions or criminal sanctions and charges against the Trump family. We will see what happens. The president right now is immune from being charged by a Department of Justice memorandum written in 1974 in the Nixon case. You can't indict or charge a sitting president, but he will no longer be sitting president at 12:01 noon on January 20th. He is susceptible to being charged. I suspect the New York State will dig into some charges because he obviously committed fraud at his foundation. He took foundation money and bought a portrait of himself to hang on someplace. That is not kosher. That's not what you do with tax-free foundation money. You don't buy a portrait of your chairman and the man who put the money there to begin with. It's a tax dodge. Okay. So, what else do we have to look forward to? Well, Governor Newsom in California is being challenged by a group of people, a group of California citizens who are circulating a petition demanding his recall. They have about 700,000 signatures, and I don't know if they can get the 1.5 million that they need between now and March, but the courts of California just extended the deadline for turning in signatures on the petition was last month in November. And they went to court and asked the court leave to hold off for 2 or 3 months, 90 days I think it was, so that they could continue signature gathering, because it was very difficult to gather signatures during the pandemic when you don't have large crowds like football games and stuff like that, where you usually have petition carriers looking for signatures outside the gates. So when people are going into the football game or coming out, they can sign the petition. I used to do it all the time. I almost always signed petitions to get things on the ballot, or for referendums, getting something on the ballot that has already been approved. Because I'm a believer in pure democracy, as much as you could possibly get. The more, the better. That makes me different than the people around Donald Trump, who are, for example, suggesting that he declare a national emergency and use the Insurrection Act to have the armed forces of the United States, the Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, and Coast Guard, occupy, take over the cities, do away with the governments, the state and local governments, and run under martial law the United States of America. And they suggest that then the president call for a new national election, and it will be run by the United States Army, commanded by, you got it, the President of the United States, who would be Donald J. Trump, holding over past the constitutional deadline of his presidency, which is December 20th at noon. There are people actually demanding that. You see it everywhere, letters to the editor and on television and radio. You see it all the time. Backing them up is this new change in television, the ratings. Fox has dropped a bit because Donald Trump is mad at the Fox Corporation, because he feels that his personal television cable company or cable channel, Fox Cable News, stabbed him in the back by calling the Arizona election early election night, by saying that Trump was going to lose Arizona. The Trumps went ballistic. Donald Jr. and everybody, they were calling Murdoch, the owner of Fox News, raising all kinds of hell that was stabbing President Trump in the back, Fox's personal president. Well, the actual vote count that was certified that showed that Biden beat Trump in Arizona. So the caller, the committee that called Arizona for Biden on election night was correct. But people really were upset. The Trump people, they were really, really upset. The same thing in Georgia. Now, what happened is that Fox, a lot of the audience that relies on Fox said, screw Fox, and they went somewhere else. They went to Newsmax, which is a cable news company owned by Christopher Ruddy, who's a very good friend of the President of the United States, Donald Trump. And then they turned to something that Trump started humping, and that was OANN, the One America News Network based in San Diego, California, right here. Well, actually, right over there. Anyway, they, OANN and Newsmax, have denied that Biden won the presidency. They have locked into the idea that the election was stolen. Now, Newsmax is bad, and their prime nighttime people are carrying on. Trump won. But OAN is going deeper and deeper, and they have really gone all out. They publicly proclaim with their Pearson Sharp and Chanel Rion, their nighttime people, their correspondents that give nice presentations. Sharp gives an excellent presentation. The only problem is he's lying through his teeth, and he's doing so at the direction of the OAN management. And if you want to know who that is, simple. Robert Herring and his son Charles Herring. They run the show. Full disclosure, twice. Once I was offered a job by Robert Herring some years ago because he liked my work, and then he changed his mind. Secondly, 2 years ago, again, I contacted him because I was going on assignment to the Middle East, and I thought that they might be interested in getting some footage out of that conflicted area. And so I met with Robert Herring and met his son Charles, and we made a deal. And they gave me some funds, which they gave me a W-2 form for. So it's a matter of public record that they actually paid me some money, and that money was for me to pay a TV crew for some footage that I would talk about, whatever the issue was. And then they decided not to use that. So yes, twice. And then I hounded Robert Herring, I must admit. I was trying to get him to legitimize OAN because it's based in San Diego. I'm a very proud San Diegan. And I tried to get him to gain a little respectability because I have some cachet in the public world of journalism, and because of my weekly columns and the 25 years I did spend in cable television hosting a bilingual program called In Vivo. So I tried and I tried to set up a Sunday morning news program, let me pick the people with a contractual non-interference to raise the level and the acceptance of One American News. But he didn't buy it. And the result is that they have gone into this rabbit hole, the Trump rabbit hole of denying that Biden won, and they've gone in feet first, head first, and they're up to here in purveying lies. Absolute, fantastical, fanatical lies on behalf of the soon-to-be former President of the United States, Donald J. Trump. That's it for the political report now. We'll do another one before January 6th, I think, and then we'll do one right after that, and we'll proceed with examining the path to the White House that's being taken by Joe Biden, compliments of the majority of American people. Thank you for being there. I'm Raul Lowry Contreras. This is Contreras Political Report, and I ask that if you want to be notified when these reports are posted, then subscribe either on YouTube or at Facebook, and we'll get it to you before people even know that it's posted, because you'll know as a subscriber. Thanks again. Thank you so much. And if you see this before Christmas, Merry Christmas. And if you see this before New Year's, Happy New Year. And if you see this before January 6th, Happy Epiphany. I know, but when I was a little boy in Mexico, on January 6th, I got presents because that was the Epiphany. And people still celebrate it, including the Orthodox, the Eastern Catholics, and here in Mexico. Thank you for being there. See you next time.